Welcome to the Investment Banking Leaders Podcast, brought to you by the Investment Banking Leaders Club, your exclusive access to the industry's most successful leaders. These experts have closed thousands of deals, generating hundreds of billions of dollars, and they're here to share their strategies, insights, and leadership lessons that can fast-track your career. But the learning doesn't stop here. Join the Investment Banking Leaders Club at ibleadersclub.com for even more exclusive insights, leadership frameworks, and career accelerating resources and events. Thanks for joining us, and best of luck on your growth journey. So I'm excited to be joined today by Turner Bredrup, the Senior Advisor and former Group Head of Harris Williams in the US. Turner has had a remarkable 35 plus year career in investment banking, having helped grow Harris Williams from a 20-person firm to the industry leader it is today. He was instrumental in founding and scaling the firm's healthcare and life sciences group, and has been a mentor and a guide to countless vice presidents and directors along the way. So in this episode, we're going to dive into the heart of career progression in M&A. We'll explore how to build a lasting firm culture and also understand the distinctions between M&A advisory and broader investment banking. Turner also shares candid reflections on leadership, judgment, and the importance of being both a deal maker and a coach. So I'm pumped to get into it. So thanks for being here today, Turner, and welcome to the Investment Banking Leaders Podcast.
Thank you for such a nice introduction. I look forward to the conversation.
So why don't we start at the beginning? Can you walk us through your early days from your time at Payne Webber and JP Morgan to joining Harris Williams?
Sure. I graduated from the University of Virginia, which you can maybe see above me here, way back in 1988 when analyst programs were probably a little bit of a newer thing. And it was a great opportunity for me to really begin to understand investment banking. I graduated with a history degree and not a lot of background in financial services. And so when I got to Payne Webber and a 16 class of analysts, it was a real eye-opener for me, and to see all the different things that go on inside of an investment bank. Payne Webber was very much of a full-service operation with equity capital markets and debt capital markets and mergers and acquisitions and other types of advisory services as well. Over the years that I was there, I really got a great start in going down the learning curve of understanding what investment banking really is. And I got a nice a la carte menu of different things to do. Ended up working a fair amount in the capital market side of things, got a little taste of M&A. And during that time, I think I began to realize that the M&A product was one that I was particularly drawn to. Primarily because the people that were doing M&A, I saw them as being very close to their clients. Their clients were always C-suite type clients, the CEO and the CFO and other senior executives. And I thought that it was a very exciting aspect of the broader investment banking landscape. So after going back to business school and returning to New York and starting to work at JP Morgan, I specifically wanted to work in the mergers and acquisitions group there. Spent a good time of my time at JP Morgan there. And then in 1998, so after roughly a 10-year period with business school in there as well, got a call from Harris Williams, which was a very small shop at the time, as you mentioned, only about 20 people, but it was 100% focused on mergers and acquisitions. It just so happened to be in my hometown, so my parents thought it was a great idea if I took a job at Harris Williams, and very luckily, my brand new wife was willing to make the leap of faith with me from New York City to Richmond, Virginia, and go to this very small, effective, maybe not quite a startup at that point, but only a few years into its existence.
What a great journey and love for the M&A, as you mentioned. I know we're going to unpack that a little bit later. So it must have been a really interesting time to join a firm that was growing. You mentioned it almost as a startup feel. And as I mentioned in the intro, you went on to build their healthcare life sciences group from scratch. So what was that experience like? What were the key factors that helped you succeed in launching a new industry group?
It was a really wonderful opportunity that the firm gave me to start our healthcare and life sciences group, but it was a pretty safe bet in many regards, from my perspective, because what Harris Williams was when I came to the firm, and after a couple of years of being there, I really appreciated it even more. It was a firm that had remarkable relationships in the private equity community, and everybody at the firm was an M&A black belt. And so the firm had built a really strong reputation for excellent execution primarily on the sell side of M&A transactions. And at the time, while the transactions were small, often sub 100 million, maybe going up to 120 to 150 million would be a big deal for us at the time. He had a very strong reputation in what we would call the middle market in the United States. So my thought was, hey, if we could just layer on another industry expertise, that our clients would appreciate, that would allow us to break into certain industries. And given the relationships that we had, I felt like some of our current clients would take a chance on somebody who hadn't really done any healthcare deals because of the reputations that we had for execution and our strong relationships. So that's really was the bet that we made. It really worked out. But I think that the secret sauce that really made it all work was our partners, who were much more established with the firm than I was at the time, were willing to promote, hey, we've got a person here who's doing healthcare, and you should take a chance on him and what they're doing. And that really got us started. And we were very scrappy starting a healthcare group, and we would take on transactions across a lot of different sectors. And the idea was just to start building a resume, but that we made, which was bet on the relationships, bet on the execution, and let the industry expertise build over time through transactional experience, really paid off. Now we're a 60-person group with offices across the U.S. and also in Europe, London, as well as over in Frankfurt. So we've grown quite a bit in the past 20-some years.
Congrats on that growth and being a key part of that. And it's exciting. I love the journey and the fact that you use that collaboration and reputation, as you put it, to really build out that group and have success and learn by the reps, which I know we're going to touch on later too. As mentioned, you've worked on both sides of the coin, M&A advisory and the full service investment banking. So having done that, how would you compare the two?
It's interesting. Being in a full service investment bank versus being a more focused advisory shop, I think has a lot to do with whether you like variety or whether you like focus. I think that can change over the arc of one's career, right? Because at least in my case, I felt like I really didn't know what investment banking was. Initially, I really liked the variety. But then after a while, I began to realize, hey, within this investment banking ecosystem, there were certain things that I liked more than others. And so I gravitated to a little bit more focus, right? But that doesn't mean that if you really like variety, that it's not okay to be more of a generalist investment banker and draw on the different areas of the investment bank to serve your clients. Because in either case, you're providing client service. The reason that I think that some people are really drawn to M&A is that it really does test all of your skill sets across everything from financial analysis to writing skills to negotiating skills. There are very few other areas of investment banking, I feel, that where those skills are constantly in use on behalf of your client relationships.
Love that. I can definitely see why the variety, building skills in different areas and really becoming more rounded in the space would be more beneficial. And what are the biggest differences in terms of, say, client relationships and execution and skill development? You've touched on a few areas there, but what else would you say?
I do feel like when you're working on an M&A transaction, you generally have the 100% full attention of the senior people at your client. So you have the CEO attention, you have the CFO attention, and it's probably one of the most important transactions that's going on in their world, right? That focus and that kind of shared commitment, I think, can be very gratifying, particularly, say, for example, if you're helping a first-time family-owned business make a transition and sell themselves into a transaction, whether it be a strategic or a financial buyer. That's a really emotional as well as financially rewarding transaction. And there's a lot of stress and there's a lot of questions. And to be able to take somebody through that process not only requires all the kind of hard financial skills and some of the softer kind of managerial skills, but sometimes it really requires empathy or friendship in order to guide those people through, hey, here are your options. Transaction A will benefit you in this way. Transaction B will benefit you in other ways. Let's figure out which one you really want to do. And so I'm not sure if you're a counselor, but in some ways you are more experienced in this particular moment of the arc of the milestones in their business. And so you are, in many instances, acting as a counselor and friend to them and trying to help them figure out what the best alternative for a very important milestone in their corporate life will be.
I can understand why that's engaging and really dialing into that relationship that you'd have with the senior clients. And many leaders have explained investment banking to me as a people business, and sometimes that gets lost, right? So it's good to see you share that and your thoughts on that too. What are the types of personalities or career goals that might align better with one model over the other?
A lot of it has to do with if you like a lot of variety and you like lots of different types of transactions, and that's how you feel that you can really add value to your client base. And I think being at a full service bank, it makes a lot of sense. If you feel like you really want to guide clients through some of the most consequential transactions in their corporate life and develop a different level of friendship because of that intensity, and also use a skill set very consistently, use all your skill sets all the time, I think it's a very gratifying to focus on mergers and acquisitions. And to me, a lot of it has to do with whether you see yourself as being very advisory related or whether you see yourself as being a broader transactional oriented advisor versus being a focused advisor on a certain type of product.
Thanks for highlighting that. I want to dive into career development, especially for VPs. We have a lot of VPs that listen to the podcast, and we know that it's one of the toughest transitions, making that leap from VP into director or managing director. It really requires some changes in approach and skill set. And I know you've been an influential coach for many. Maybe start with, why do you view the VP seat as so pivotal in a banker's career? And what separates those who thrive from those who stall?
The VP transition is just, you're right in the middle of your career arc. And when I think about that, if you were to imagine that there are a couple different ways I think about it. One is that you're going from being a doer to being a manager. And then maybe on another axis, you're going from being internally focused to being client focused. And if you were to draw the 45-degree line up, the VP is right in the middle. So they're making that transition from being a doer, and by being a doer, I mean actually managing financial models, actually writing first drafts of memorandum, pitch books, all those types of things. And then I would say on the communication side, most of their communication before they make that VP transition is going to be internal. It's going to be working closely with analysts or analysts working with associates. It's going to be raising their hand in a group meeting internally and saying, hey, I've got an idea about a way to do something on this transaction. But for the most part, for a lot of time, communication is internal and not so much external, right? As you make that VP, you're really making a big transition. You're definitely going from being a doer to a manager, which is very hard for somebody who's probably been remarkably good at being a doer, to all of a sudden now stepping back and letting somebody else do it. That's just a hard transition. And then on the client communication side, this may be a little bit easier, but it can be a little bit of an intimidating transition to go from being internally communicating to actually communicating to your client, in some cases making recommendations of what direction they should go on a particular question or topic. So that's why I think it is a very hard transition. So one of the things I think you need to do is to really start becoming a coach to your junior people. And it is hard to do, but I think you need to kind of wake up. I'm not sure who said this, but there was somebody who said, if you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. If you teach a man to fish, you feed him for life, right? That's the attitude you need to come at the VP job with, which is, hey, how can I teach somebody who's on my team, who's more, that was in that seat that I was in just a little while ago, how can I teach them to do this in a way that will not require me to redo their work and be a doer? And that's a big shift. And then on the communication side, I think when you become a VP, or even before, but certainly when you're a VP, taking some chances in your communication. Maybe initially you start exploring strategic thought processes or tactical thought processes with more senior members of your deal team and say, hey, I've got an idea. What do you think about this? And then also make sure that you're ramping up your communication with the appropriate level people within your client. So if you're working with a strategic seller, getting to know the COO and the CFO particularly well, and bonding and having that relationship and really helping them in the execution process. If you're working with a private equity shop, maybe you develop a relationship with that VP across the table from you, who is your client, who you're trying to guide through a sale of one of their portfolio companies, to start developing those relationships and take time to do that. It's not anything magical. It's nothing that you haven't done before with friends and other colleagues, but it's just taking the time to develop those relationships on the client side as well as managing your relationships within your own firm.
Perfect. Great advice. So I can definitely understand why that shift from doer to manager, doer to leader, as you put it, is a tough one. And I like your tips about start coaching and really think about how you can teach someone in your team something which doesn't need to be done again. I think that's super smart. And the communication, I know I've touched on that with others as well. It's great. Share tactics with seniors, start building those relationships at the client side to prepare yourself for that step. How do you think about building confidence and judgment in young bankers? I hear that building this judgment bank is quite key for that shift as well. What's your take on that, Turner?
First of all, I couldn't agree with you more. Obviously, our business is very much in an apprenticeship business, and the reason that it takes time as an apprentice is because you're trying to develop judgment. But I think ways of accelerating that are to take some risks in safe environments so that you are able to start developing that judgment. Let's say you're working on the back end of an M&A transaction. You've got 2 or 3 different parties that are very seriously trying to buy this business. You've gotten your final bids and you're trying to figure out how to manage these last 3 bidders. Well, if you're a VP, here's an excellent opportunity. Dive into the documents. And when I say documents, I mean the SPA. Dive into working capital. Dive into all the different areas of negotiation and start coming up with ideas about here's how I would manage these things. Here are messages that I would deliver to buyer A, a message to buyer B and to buyer C, and run them by your team internally. Say, hey, I've got some ideas. What do you think about these? That's a safe environment. And on the presumption that your senior people are interested in your development, which I'm sure they are, then they're going to want to listen to you. You may come up with some great ideas in the process, but at a minimum, you're going to get some great feedback internally from people about, hey, that's a really good idea, but did you think about this? And maybe we should take one of your ideas, and the other idea maybe not so much because of this reason. And that's a safe environment for you to start building judgment, because as you move from VP to, at least at our firm, we have a director level and then a managing director level. You want to start building your skill set, because when you become a director, you're going to be expected to be a little bit more on the front lines. And then when you're a managing director, you're definitely going to be on the front lines, communicating, articulating, and very importantly, implementing those strategies. So taking the baby steps and taking the risk internally to maybe come up with some pretty dumb ideas that you learn from is, I think, a good way of developing judgment.
Yeah, I like that safe environment take. And you seem to talk quite a bit actually about seeking counsel from senior team members and getting feedback. And I can see why that's so important for growing. And I guess you get so much exposure in investment banking a lot of the time. So you have a lot of opportunities to grow.
I will say at our firm, it's one of the things that we've really focused on. I remember when I showed up here in 1998, and one of the co-founders of our firm, Hyder Harris, we were sitting around a table and he looked at the analyst before we went into a pitch. What fee do you think we should charge for this deal? And I remember thinking, wow, that doesn't really happen many places, where the most senior guy, one of the co-founders of the firm, is asking the most junior person on the team first a very important and very tactical question. And I was also pretty impressed that the analyst had actually thought about it, because unbeknownst to me, I was just new at the firm, but this is what happened every time. But the analyst and the junior people were asked about things like that. And so when you have a culture like that, where people are expected not only to understand just their lane, but also to begin thinking more about the broader transaction and things you're trying to accomplish, either with a client or with a potential buyer, that really benefits not only the work product of the people at that level, but it also impacts just the combined work product of the whole team if everybody's thinking a little bit beyond their level throughout the transaction.
A great story. It really helps me connect with that, and I can understand again why that's powerful. And I think it's playing that level above. It's understanding the why, like you say, rather than just the immediate work track. So definitely powerful stuff. Let's talk a little bit about relationship building and client trust. I know that's something you're really proud of that's done well at Harris Williams. So I think you described to me this kind of evolution from transactional relationships to personal and trust-based relationships. What are the small everyday things a VP, a director can do to begin building that trust with clients, would you say?
It takes time, first of all, because ultimately building trust is something that just generally takes time. And there needs to be enough history between two people that they've seen each other in various situations where they feel like they know how this person is going to react, right? So to me, it starts a little bit with building a reputation. And under the reputation, I think you want to start building a reputation for understanding your product well. In our case, that's really the M&A product. And then on top of that, you want to start developing a reputation for knowing what's going on in the market and understanding your industry and what's going on in that. And I think those two things really get you in the door so that you are developing a dialogue with people on the client side that they want to talk to you. And they're like, this is a valuable conversation. That is a really great start. But where you take it from kind of reputation into relationship is now you start building trust. And so not only are you conveying information, but you are now trying to help people solve problems. And once people begin to see you as somebody who can help them solve problems and that your advice is very much in their best interest and not self-serving, that's when I think you really begin to build great trust with your client base. And sometimes you need to look at your client and say, I don't think you should do this. Let me tell you why we don't think that's the best idea. And we think this is a superior idea to do this. When you start getting into that dialogue and your client starts listening to you, that's when you've built a relationship. And I think also in building a relationship, it's also important not only for it to be strictly a business relationship, but at least I have found that my best relationships are ones where they've made the transition from being business only to being both business and personal and friendship. That's when you make that final transition. That's not going to happen with every client unless you're a true emotional chameleon. But I do think over the arc of a career, you're going to get a couple of handfuls of clients where you really make that transition from being an advisor to being a trusted advisor and friend, which is something that we very much emphasize around here at our firm.
I like how you build it up as levels, and it makes a lot of sense, right? You've got the industry knowledge, the product knowledge, create meaningful conversations, valuable conversations, and then you really build upon that with the trust and solving problems. Maybe some of the best advice out there not to do a deal, right, can really help with that. So connect with that. Can you elaborate on how that personal understanding helps build better relationships and repeat business? I think in our previous conversation, you talked a bit about the love language, whether it was baseball or dinners or something else.
Yeah, as a preface, at Harris Williams, I think we generate something around 70 to 75% of our business from repeat clients. So, and you might even argue that's too high a number, but the number of clients continues to grow year after year. So we're pretty proud of that statistic. And I think it does speak to the fact that what we have tried to do is associate ourselves with best-in-class potential clients and then do great work on their behalf and try to think in their best interest and then execute very decisively against those objectives. And so I'd only give you that as preface because I really do think that the combination of thinking about your client's best interest first and only when you're acting as an investment banker, and particularly in an M&A setting, and then guiding them through that is a really unbelievable opportunity to develop a relationship because you are working on a very intense multi-month transaction where there's a lot of emotional ups and downs. But I think if you only let it be a business transaction, you've really missed an opportunity to take it to another level. And as you said, speak their love language. And you just got to figure out what your clients like. Some clients might like outdoor activities. Some clients might like more cultural indoor activities. And if you can match up with that and do things on their turf and get to know them in a different way, you're bound to take that relationship to another level where, the first part of your conversation isn't, if you pick up the phone and have a conversation, you're not starting off by saying, hey, let me tell you what's going on in the market. That's a little cold. You might pick up the phone and all of a sudden you're having a conversation about, hey, how's your kid doing? The last time we talked, I remember they were having a tough time becoming a starter on the girls' soccer team. When you start off your conversations there, that's when you really have reached a different level of relationship with your clients. And naturally, I just think people are going to want to share more with somebody who's at that level of friendship than just the transactional level of friendship, where it's all about deal multiples and things like that.
Yeah, I like that. As you said, it's a great opportunity across those multiple months that you're working together to really connect and solve problems and get to know someone on a much more personable level. You make it sound really simple. And
Well,
obviously,
but getting back to your point, like when you're a VP, start doing that with kind of the VP level people with your client. It's not like you have to wait to do it with the CEO. You start doing it because one day the person who's the VP level person or the COO or whoever it is at a client, one day they're going to be the CEO and they're going to remember you from 10 years ago when you were befriending them and becoming a great advisor at a younger age.
definitely makes a lot of sense. I've heard that before and I can connect with that for sure. You talked a bit about the repeat business that you get. Harris Williams is also well known for the culture of promoting from within. I think it's about 80% of MDs have been promoted internally, which is a really amazing stat. As someone who's been there from the very early days, I really want to unpack this a little bit. What has been the key to maintaining such a strong and consistent culture, even as the firm has grown significantly in terms of number and locations?
First of all, I really tip my hat to everybody at the firm, but in particular our firm leadership. This has been an area of high focus and real effort over the years. Many, for better or for worse, there are a lot of kind of first gen Harris Williams people still here that are reasonably senior, but they're still here. And a lot of the people that are running the firm now are that next layer that kind of learned from the first gen, right? And I think they've taken up the mantle and done a really good job as we've expanded and have many more offices and we're global and we've got a lot of different time zones and all that kind of stuff to continue to reinforce the importance of being a single firm, a one firm mentality is what we call it. When you say that, that sounds great, but I think it's really backing it up that is very important. And so people are really praised on a almost daily basis and certainly a weekly basis when there's cross industry group collaboration or cross office collaboration. And those are highlighted within our culture as, hey, this was a great idea. You know, when you get the healthcare group and the T&L group together to chase a deal in Europe with the European-based healthcare group and a US-based transportation logistics group, that is celebrated around the firm. That's just one example of countless numbers of collaborations. So celebrating events like that, and then also, quite frankly, aligning incentives. And people are incentivized. I say that's not code for monetarily incentivized, though that may be the case as well. But people that are buying into the culture and the people that are view teamwork as one of the first and foremost important things around the firm tend to just do better here and therefore are the people that end up being promoted and doing well. It's one part effort, but also aligning incentives and making sure that everybody understands that working as a team is just a lot better strategy than having a culture where people feel like they just have to go plant the flag and say, hey, it's all about me. I did it, I did it, I did it. No, we is a much better word than I around Harris Williams.
Amazing. So a really good focus on that teamwork, the shared incentives, cross-industry work. That's what I got from that as well. So that cross-industry work must have really strengthened the firm's ability to serve clients, right? And scale as you have. Is that fair to say?
I certainly think so. There are just countless areas where this has happened. Think about a technology group, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, a technology group, the technology in and of itself is a pretty cool thing, but it touches so many different industries, right? So there might be technology around energy and power. There might be technology, you know, that's affecting kind of the way consumer goods are purchased or managed and whatnot, ERPs, all that kind of stuff. So if you're a client and somebody shows up and you have a technology company servicing one of these other industries and only technology people show up versus another group shows up with both technology people and people that understand the end market really well, which team might be viewed as being superior? Our view is that the team that brings both sides of the equation is going to look superior. And so we believe that collaboration, and it's an easy example to give, industry group and industry group, but it also might be just personal relationships. It may be, hey, so and so in a very different industry group just has an amazing relationship with this particular client. Often in our case, that might be a private equity firm. So let's make sure that we're bringing that person, even though they're really not related to this industry and don't really know anything about this company or whatnot. But it would be really important for us to bring that person because they have such a strong relationship with this client from years past that we should include them on the deal team because it's going to make everybody feel more confident about the outcome. I think industry group's the easiest one to see, but it can manifest itself in many different ways around the firm.
Powerful, yeah, with relationships, bringing in the relationships and helping, and the industry expertise, the product expertise. So it really helps me connect with that. And as a leader, how do you balance high performance with humanity, supporting people not just in their roles, but through their life events, and in your case as a mentor, through personal development?
Another tip of the hat to the founding partners of this firm, Kyder Harris, when he was helping to found the firm, said that what he wanted to do was to build an organization that was incredibly relationship oriented towards both clients and towards employees, and having a balance between both. And look, it's definitely hard to do in our industry. There's no question that in our industry, and certainly at our firm as well, that people are working a lot of hours in order to get the work done. We are in a client service business, that's just the way it works. But things can get out of balance if you're only focused on just doing the work for your clients. You also need to be thinking, hey, are we building good relationships within our firm from the oldest people in the firm to the most junior people in the firm? Is there connectivity? Do people care about one another? Because you're going to get much better things out of every level of person if they feel like they're in a culture that actually cares about them. And so what are the moments that you have to do that? Well, it's during those life events, making sure that whether it's the birth of a child, whether it's a death in the family, whether it's maybe just a milestone like, boy, you've been working really hard and need to take a break. All those things, and having the confidence that, hey, this is an important thing for you to focus on. Let the rest of the team pick up a little bit of slack for you while you're managing this situation in your non-work life. Or maybe just it is your work life. Maybe we just need to give you a break. Everybody around here feels empowered to do that. Do we get it right every time? No, we definitely make the mistakes and we kick ourselves for it. But at the same time, we know that the firm is incredibly supportive of us taking that step to make sure that our people are taken care of. Because look, while not all our offices are in Richmond, at least I've spent my career in Richmond, it's not like working in New York City where everybody goes to a different borough or a different state after work. We're all in this town together. We know each other. And that really makes us have more of a tangible relationship with everybody's outside life. And I think that's very helpful when we're trying to help people manage what they're doing that is not work related and create a conducive environment to having a real career. Because that's what we're all about, is trying to have people that come in. We hire incredibly bright young ladies and men, and we want them to stay at the firm and thrive and become leaders at our firm. And you can't do that if they're just getting kind of worked to death. The other thing that I will say that is also very nice about our firm is that people close a lot of deals around this place. If you're working really hard but you close a deal, I think it feels a lot better than working really hard and having a deal fail, or working really hard on pitches and not winning. We close a lot of deals in a year, and that's always a positive on the work front in terms of building a little bit of happiness and a little bit of camaraderie.
Winning on the work, I'm sure, is a big part of the happiness, right? And I can see many of the deal toys behind you to celebrate those successes. So as a deal toy guy, you know, that makes me smile.
Yeah.
And I can see why 80% of MDs are being promoted internally. This focus on relationship, this almost community, close-knit enrichment, as you said it. We have our own factory in Canada. And our team up there, they live in a relatively small town and they all know each other really well. And I see the power of that. Working in a big city like London, it's much more difficult. So I can see how you harness that and how it's so important for the culture. So thanks for sharing. Believe it or not, Turner, we're moving towards the end of the episode. It's flown by. A couple of questions left, though. Our regular listeners know I ask this to all guests. Which books, podcasts, materials do you recommend that have had a big impact on you in your career?
I'm going to deviate a little bit from the question. I'm a very visual person.
Okay.
And I will throw out a movie that I think speaks to teamwork in a way that I found remarkably compelling. And it's something that I think about quite often. There is a story, and the movie is called Meru, and it is a story of three climbers who are attempting to summit a Himalayan peak that has never been summited before. It's a very arduous shark fin looking piece of rock. But not only is it incredibly steep, basically vertical, it's also at elevation. And so it's a remarkably hard feat. So it's never been accomplished. And it is one of the great stories of human perseverance, setback, and teamwork that I have ever seen. And if you ever want to get a great example of what it means to be a teamwork and to accomplish things as a group as opposed to accomplishing things as an individual, I could not recommend the movie Meru better. It teaches a lot of amazing lessons of perseverance and overcoming remarkable obstacles in order to achieve something as a group of people.
That's awesome. I can go with visual, so I'll let you dodge the book question. And this is a great one, and we'll put some in the show notes so those that want to remember it and watch it can. So thanks for sharing. And finally, last but not least, what advice would you give to the next generation of leaders, especially those that are looking to grow from VP to MD? I know you've given us a lot of tips and advice today, but if you could just put a bow on it, what would you say?
I think I've probably touched on this theme a lot during our conversation, but I just feel like people are going to want to work with people they trust. And that is inside your firm, and that is clients outside your firm. And so anything you can do to reinforce the trust in your actions towards others. And on the client side, I think that's acting in their best interest. And I think internally, it's acting in the best interest of your people. Sometimes that may not be the most popular. I'm not suggesting you only do what's popular, but if you do something that maybe seems arduous or unpopular, have the self-confidence to talk to your team about it and explain why your path is going to be one that's going to require a little bit more work and a little bit more effort, because that's a way of building trust. And people are just going to want to work harder and want to be a part of a team if they feel like they trust the people leading it.
Love that. What a great way to finish the episode, and more great advice for our listeners to take. So Turner, the last thing for me to say is thank you so much for joining me. Appreciate your time and the great insights you shared with us today.
Thank you very much for your time, and a lot of fun speaking with you.
Thanks, Turner. This episode of the podcast was brought to you by the Investment Banking Leaders Club. And to keep leveling up your career, join the club at ibleadersclub.com for exclusive insights, leadership strategies, and career growth resources straight from the industry's top professionals. I want to say thanks to our key partner, Altrum, the global leader in financial deal gifts, awards, and recognition, for their ongoing support of our mission to empower both aspiring and senior investment banking leaders. I really hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thanks for tuning in, and until next time, best of luck on your growth journey.